Hey everyone, my name is Weston and this is an advanced Retribution Paladin DPS guide, made during the 9.0.5 patch of Shadowlands. This guide will cover some of the intricacies of the specialization and focus on specific scenarios rather than generalizations. While the average beginner's guide is great, they already exist, and I have personally found that a more in-depth style of guide with the goal of maximizing PvE DPS is surprisingly rare, especially for Retribution Paladins. For those of you subscribed to me, this may seem like a weird video, but I play WoW, and I suspected this may help some people. So, let's begin. This being a Ret DPS guide, we need to first establish every element of our character that will affect a rotation as a paladin before we can jump into gameplay. Starting with our Covenant, Soulbind, and conduits of choice. Luckily for us Rets, there's really only one option for Covenants because it's just so good, and that is of course Kyrian with the Pelagos tree. While I think we all initially liked the idea of choosing a Covenant that we identify with in this expansion, in reality, we were always going to just choose what performs the best, and Kyrian is the clear winner in this category for us, as Divine Toll is an incredibly powerful ability that lines up perfectly with our damage windows as Ret, as we'll see later. Next, we take the Pelagos Soulbind for the Combat Meditation Mastery buff, which lasts 10 seconds and activates when we use Divine Toll, which once again fits perfectly in the build we'll cover soon. For conduits, we always want Ringing Clarity in one of the potency slots. Just like Kyrian in general, this is just too good not to have, because this conduit gives Divine Toll a chance to send out extra judgments on the main target, allowing for more damage in our short burst window by generating extra holy power. You should be starting to see a trend here. The next potency slot could be a few things, but for me, it's always Virtuous Command. Expurgation can sometimes be better depending on whether or not the fight has AOE, but I've personally decided that the hassle of changing conduits is not worth the tiny DPS gain of swapping them out every other fight. As far as the rest of our conduit choices, you can use whatever you want. For talents, the bread and butter of our class right now is Final Reckoning. This may change in the future, and the passive talent build might become the go-to again, in which case if you're watching this and that happened, I'm sorry, because this video really will be all about Final Reckoning and how we can maximize its potential. Final Reckoning is an uncapped AOE targeted ability in which your every global is extremely important, as any target hit is debuffed to take 50% increased holy damage from your holy power spenders for 10 seconds. And right now, how you treat this 1 minute cooldown is the primary way in which you will set yourself apart as Ret. And now you can see why so many of our choices thus far revolve around a short burst. For the single target Final Reckoning build, here's what I and basically everyone else uses. Thing is, once you have resolved to spec into Final Reckoning, the rest of the talents basically pick themselves because, like our Covenant, they work well with the window. Everything here seems designed to support Final Reckoning. Seraphim, a 15-second stat buff that costs 3 holy power, lines up perfectly with our 1 minute burst rotation at a 45-second cooldown. Execution Sentence, a falling hammer that costs 3 holy power and does bonus damage when it lands based on the damage you did to the target while it was falling on them, once again fits flawlessly as a 1 minute cooldown. Fires of Justice is a less obvious talent and could easily be replaced with Blade of Wrath. But as we'll talk about in a second, it works really well with a certain legendary, which is why I have it selected. Speaking of legendaries, you basically have 2 to choose from right now in single target. Well, they're all competitive, so you're honestly fine with any, but these are the top 2. The recently buffed Final Verdict option, which essentially is just a damage increase you don't think about, or what I use, the Magistrate's Judgment, which gives your judgment a 75% chance to make your next holy power ability cost 1 less. This can stack with the Fires of Justice talent, which gives your Crusader Strike a shorter cooldown and a chance to make your next holy power ability cost 1 less as well. So you can maybe start to see where the synergy lies. Saving holy power equates to more Templar's Verdicts or Divine Storms within the Final Reckoning window. These 2 legendaries are close, and I'm not actually sure which is better, but I think the potential that Magistrate has when it comes to getting more damage pumped into our burst phase edges it out, especially on any fight that has any sort of downtime whatsoever. Oh, and it was also recently made to proc from the judgments casted with Divine Toll, which is extremely nice. For trinkets, there's basically only one option for on use, and that is Sinful Gladiator's Badge of Ferocity. Even at item level 207, this thing pairs so well with our 1 minute burst rotation that it's a must-have. A primary stat buff with the same cooldown as Final Reckoning is just insane. We have what we need set up. Now it's time to dive into the rotation. So to understand the basic rationale behind each global we press and why in this window, we'll go over the vanilla single target opener. Starting off, and this is very important, do not be afraid to be patient. This burst is everything for our damage as Ret Paladins, so you naturally want to enter it well prepared. That generally means two things. You want to be max holy power going into Final Reckoning, and you want every possible buff up and rolling for the entire window, like Seraphim, damage pots, racials, power infusion, and your unused trinket. Of course, that includes Avenging Wrath too if it's available, or Wings as I'll call it from now on. Both of these prerequisites play into one basic idea. Use as many holy power spenders as you possibly can before Final Reckoning wears off. That's it. That's the goal. So, on pull, start by casting Judgment, because it's your farthest range holy power generator and you aren't in melee range yet. It's all you can cast. Then while walking to the boss, cast Blade of Wrath because it's also ranged, just not as far as Judgment, so we do it after. Then, once in melee, build to 5 holy power with a couple of Crusader strikes. Simple enough so far, right? But this is where patience can make or break us. The next thing to do is spend 3 holy power to activate Seraphim, right? If we want all possible buffs up for Final Reckoning, then this is obvious, yeah? The thing is, while you would be right to suggest that, remember that we also want to enter Final Reckoning with 5 holy power. If you activate Seraphim here as soon as you possibly can, you'll find yourself sitting there after, waiting for holy power generators to come back up so that you can get back to 5 before entering the window like we talked about. This is a waste of Seraphim time. You're not spending any globals and it's ticking away while you wait, which is bad enough, but as such it tempts you to just use Final Reckoning and start bursting with only 2 or 3 holy power going in, because you don't want to waste Seraphim time and you feel rushed. Introduce lust or heroism into this equation and it's even more tempting to just go, and this is really bad. The better way to do this is just wait before you apply it. Once you're at 5 holy power from your first 4 globals, just wait a few seconds until Blade of Wrath is about off cooldown. Then pop Seraphim, allowing you to immediately build back to 5 with Blade and a Judgment or a Crusader Strike. And then you can enter the window after that. You can even activate Wings here and use a Hammer of Wrath for an extra holy power. Whatever globals you might save by starting your burst as soon as you possibly can is absolutely not worth the suboptimal damage that results from rushing into this thing. You don't need to waste Seraphim time, and you don't need to enter Final Reckoning with less than 5 holy power. You just need patience. There are exceptions to this, and we'll go over some of them later, but this is the rule. With that established, we're ready. The next thing to do after Seraphim and being patient to build back to 5 holy power is to cast Final Reckoning. This is also where you want to activate Wings, because Wings is off the global cooldown, and the Final Reckoning hit itself can do a lot of damage, especially in AoE. If you started Wings a global before to use a hammer for the holy power, you're good here because it's already rolling. But this is also when you would want to activate your trinket, racials, or any other temporary buff that is off the global cooldown. Feel free to use macros to make it easy. Okay, once you are buffed up and the target has felt your reckoning, the damage begins. On single target, next we spend 3 holy power to start your execution sentence falling. The reason we lead with this is, like I mentioned before, it takes a percentage of all the damage you do to the target that has execution sentence applied and adds that to its final damage. And we use it after Final Reckoning because it only benefits from that 50% damage buff Final Reckoning offers if it is casted second, as execution sentence snapshots the current state of the target. Next up, Divine Toll. We use it next partially because it gives us a mastery buff that will benefit the rest of the window, and while you might think that it's best to apply this mastery buff beforehand like we do with Seraphim, I like the way you think, but because of the Ringing Clarity conduit, Divine Toll has a high chance to generate 3 holy power, and holy power is everything in this window. So if it does proc, you're back at 5, which is much more valuable than slightly more overall uptime on the mastery buff. So we save it until this point hoping that it procs. Next, we spend. After that is when we cast Wake of Ashes and spend again. And finally we cast Hammer of Wrath and spend again. If Divine Toll does not proc, it only generates 1 holy power, which still leaves you at 3 when we use it, allowing us to spend, wake, spend like I just said. The difference here is that you'll just need to use 2 generators after that last spender before you can spend again, instead of just Hammer. So that's it in a basic form. Nothing changes with Lust except that you were able to get in another spender at the end of the window because you have time to build up again, but nothing about this order changes. For AoE, it's all about the same, with 2 major differences. First, Divine Toll can generate up to 5 holy power on multiple targets, and we don't want to waste that. Second, we aren't using Execution Sentence, but instead spec into Zeal, so you just replace its cast in this order with the Divine Storm. Okay, In an AOE situation, assuming you've patiently arrived at 5 holy power with Seraphim rolling just like on a single target, you proceed as normal for 2 globals, Wings plus Final Reckoning, and then spend, this time on Divine Storm. And now things change. We don't want to waste holy power, so at this point we want to get to 0 before casting Divine Toll, and to do that, you just cast a Hammer of Wrath and then another Divine Storm. Then we Divine Toll, shooting us up to 5, then you spend, wake, spend, judgment, spend. Keep in mind, all of this can change based on what you're killing. If it's a pack of mobs in Mythic Plus that will barely live 15 seconds because I have a Fire Mage in my group, then I don't bother with patience. I build to 3, Seraphim, and then go all in. Every global is precious in a situation like that, and it's up to you to discern whether or not being efficient or fast is warranted in any given encounter. Exceptions are made when you just don't have the time to be thorough in your setup. And I'm sure you've noticed by now that I have not made mention of the Fires of Justice talent or the Magistrate Legendary. The reason is that if I explain the priorities of the window, you'll know what to do and why, and I didn't want to confuse the people who don't use that legendary or that talent. All those buffs do is lower holy power costs, so sometimes you can spend twice in a row, and so when you can, you do. It's pretty straightforward. Aside from playing Final Reckoning well, maybe the single biggest difference maker when it comes to overall DPS is cooldown timing. It is not always beneficial to use everything on cooldown because of how multiplicative math works out. This is especially important for Ret, as the Final Reckoning build is extremely bursty and volatile, and a single mistimed window will turn your 99 parse into a purple, if that. So pay attention to these examples. First, here's Huntsman Altimore on Mythic. I start out the pool by just building to 3 holy power, then a Seraphim, and Wings plus Divine Toll. You may be thinking that this looks less than optimal, and it absolutely is. But if we were to fast forward, you would see that I barely got in another damage window right before the first ad dies. If I took my precious time being efficient with my opener, I wouldn't have had burst available for the second use on 2 targets. I did this exact thing a few weeks ago, and it helped me end up with the number 2 parse in the world on the Mythic version of the fight at the time. It's like rank 17 now. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of this, even though I attempted to capture it at my group's most recent kill. We ended up doing a little more damage than last time, and the ad died before my burst, even though I rushed the opener. Knowing that, from now on, I should probably just take my time with the opener. You see how things change based on timing. The point is, if you can, getting a second window in while 2 targets is available is way more damage than being efficient in getting 1 or 2 more spenders in the first window, while missing the additional target of the second window a minute later. This is an example of rushing to our advantage, but next, let's talk about holding. If, hypothetically, we Rets found ourselves in a 1 minute 30 second fight that spawns 2 ads 30 seconds in, we have a choice. I can choose between using my window 2 total times, 1 at pool and the second at 1 minute in, or I could hold my cooldowns for 30 seconds for when the 2 ad spawns. So, which is better? Obviously, I'm trying to make a point here, so I'm guessing you know which. You will do more damage by holding cooldowns in this scenario, because using your window on the 2 ads plus the boss is just about tripling your damage output in our burst window. So by holding cooldowns, I have effectively done the same damage if I were able to use my window 3 times on a single target, just all at once. And that's how multiplicative math can create situations in which losing out on total cooldown usage actually increases DPS. Of course, this might all change depending on what you need. If I'm pushing a high key and it's tyrannical, I might value boss DPS higher for the sake of the group and the run, so I pop everything on cooldown, because boss damage matters more than overall DPS. I would also do this on a progression raid fight if there's any sort of boss DPS check. It's up to you in each given situation to work out what is best. Well, that is all I have for you Ret Paladins out there today. I know that I did not cover everything I could have, not even close. There's a lot I could talk about, from our rotation between burst windows to other talents, other legendaries, gems, enchants, all of that. I could really even dedicate a whole section on our utility and its usefulness when it comes to maximizing DPS for us and for others.
Up.
I don't have AOE.
That's so much damage. Oh yeah.
Welcome. Thank you.
But this is all I had time for, so if anyone would like to ask a question, go right ahead, and I'll try my best to answer. Oh, and I'll link my newly made Twitch channel where I'll be streaming a dungeon or 2 a few nights a week, so you can ask me there too if you'd like. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helps someone out there.